You're listening to Artistic Finance, show 182. Today's show is a guide of financial resources and where to find them. And this is for freelancers working in theater or other facets of the entertainment industry. Now, this is especially helpful to anybody who's needing help filing taxes or anybody who's in your first or second year of professional work and you need some guidance of where to look for things, or just for anybody who needs a refresher on some of the financial resources that are out there. The resources we're going to cover are about taxes, financial planning, educational worksheets and supplements, job boards, unions, community resources, aka diversity, equity, and inclusion organizations that are covering things that are larger or more complex than just individual finances, scholarships, financial communities, and episodes of Artistic Finance that are separated out by career focuses. Now, what we're reviewing are web resources, so I'm going to be sharing my screen. If you want to glance at what I'm referencing, make sure you're watching this on YouTube. Without further ado, let's get to the show.
You are listening to Artistic Finance, where we help creatives learn about the business of show business.
Welcome and thank you for being here. I'm your host, Ethan Steimel. Now, I'm recording this February 11th, 2025, and the biggest news in the USA is that we are a month into the Trump administration's second presidential term. And so currently, it's the biggest hailstorm of deregulation that this country has weathered in its nearly 250 years of existence. Now, the biggest public focus of that has been on the retraction of federal diversity, equity, and inclusion legislation, which is attempting to push equal rights laws back 70 years to a time when my grandparents were my age and when my parents were teenagers. And it's so weird because I remember driving around with my parents in the town I grew up in, and they would say things like, oh, this is where the black school was, or this is where the white school was. And I remember thinking, like, that's so weird that my parents were alive when TV was black and white and there was this segregation going on. Like, it was so weird to me. And I would thought, like, well, we'll never go back to that. And I don't think we are going back to that. But the laws are going back to that, which is just insane. And if you look at the federal holiday calendar, Black History Month is no longer a thing. And that's something that I've never been alive when there was not a Black History Month. Well, I guess now I am alive during that. Weird. And Pride Month. Now, Pride Month did come into existence when I was 11. So that I guess had lived without, but now there's no Pride Month. So I'll just say yikes to everything that's going on. And it shouldn't color any of the things I'm going to talk about today, except for the fact that maybe in the future, Social Security won't be a thing, or maybe the tax assistance options will go away, or healthcare.gov might disappear, or some of these things just may look different than they are today. So if you're listening in the future, hopefully this is just a blip that we're all moving past and things are better. But for right now, it's a wild time. But regardless of the political, legal, and maybe real life battles that are going on, we all have to look out for our own lives, our own careers, and we all have to file taxes by April 15th. So let's take a look at some helpful resources. Now, these resources are compiled by me. After all these episodes we've had, I've learned about things and I've compiled them all into a list, and it is a living document. So in the show notes today, instead of having links to everything I'm going to mention, there's only going to be 2 links. One is to the YouTube link of this episode if you want to watch any of this, and the other is going to be to artisticfinance.com. If you go there, on the upper menu, there's a resources tab. If you click the plus next to that, it's going to give you a drop-down option, and that is how you get to this living document. Side note here that formerly this link was only available to patrons of the show on our Patreon page, or it was available for specific episodes. However, last week I was talking to a class at Rockford University in Illinois, and somebody asked a question that I've been asked a lot, and that was the simple thing of how do you find an accountant for artists? Now, that's prompted me to, instead of putting this behind the Patreon paywall, I'm going to put it directly onto the website so that it's super easy to find. After all, that's really what this is all about, is sharing information and resources and knowledge. I'll talk a little bit more about the Patreon at the end of the episode, but for the moment, just know that artisticfinance.com is where you can quickly go and find this information. And speaking of that, let's go there right now and get started. So what you're looking at is artisticfinance.com. And up here at the top, there's a resources tab. I click the plus button, and there's two links currently, all financial resources and accountants. Now I'm going to click on all financial resources, and that's going to take us to this living document. The first thing we do is we notice that we have headers here, and the first one is taxes. The first bullet point here is accountants. I'm going to follow this link. It's going to take me to another living document that I have, and this one is called Accountants for Entertainment. Now, I have a couple notes at the top. The first one, it says too many choices. I have put 3 asterisk marks next to any accountants that prioritize freelance artists or creatives. So if you have information overload or you can't make a decision here, just look for the 3 asterisks and contact one of those groups for help. My next note is that in the USA, location of the accountant is of little importance. Any tax preparer in any state can file your taxes, both your federal and your state. Even though I have these separated out into locations, that really doesn't matter. Any of them will do. All right, so now we get into the different kinds of accountants here. And first off is free. Income limitations apply to these, but it seems to be for earned income that's at $48,000 or less, or there are higher tiers depending. You just have to check the eligibility requirements. And some of them you can make up to $100,000 and still get help here. So the first one is IRS Free File. If we click on that link, it takes us to the IRS website, and they have 8 different companies that they partner with that you can file with for free. So there's Free Tax USA, Tax Act, 1040 Now. They all have different requirements, and some of those are listed on here, and you can just look and decide. The next option is My Free Taxes. Now, this is something that's sponsored by the United Way. And again, I'm sure there are requirements, but you just go to this website and you start filing your taxes. The next one is getyourrefund.org. Same as the others, click in, start filing, or start answering the questions. All right, then here is something that's helpful for people who maybe went in person, and that is called VITA, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. So I have actually 3 links underneath this one. One is for LA, one is for New York City, and then one is for the locator, the VITA locator. And what you do there is that takes you to the IRS website, and you enter your zip code, and then you can set a range of within 5 miles, 10 miles, etc. And it will find you locations of companies that you can actually make appointments with and go. But let's take a closer look at the New York City link. And this is by SAG-AFTRA. And what I like about theirs, if you go to the bottom of their page, they have resources and downloads, and it's all the forms that VITA requires in order for you to file with them. And what's good about this is that it just tells you everything you need to know for your taxes. And so they have the IRS intake form, the rules for union members, and an informational checklist. That's all sort of VITA information. And then they have total gross income worksheet, a W-2 worksheet, a performing arts expenses worksheet, an out-of-town expenses worksheet, and an auto expenses. And so when you're wondering about deductions, itemizing, things like that, they have all those forms. And so you download all of those, look at them, and then input your information. And that's all you need to file your taxes. It's so simple. Anyway, so that's one option. If you just don't know where to start, is go look at those forms and you'll quickly learn what information you need. So those are all the free options. So then in our accounting living document, the next option is software. So here we have Tax Act, TurboTax, H&R Block, Free Tax USA, and I put the IRS to go app, which doesn't actually help you file the taxes. But if you're a freelancer with 1099 income and you're paying quarterly, in our episode with Heather Gilbert, she explained that you can pay your quarterly taxes through that app. So it makes it super simple. And you don't have to do it like on the quarter. You can do it at any time. But let me click on Tax Act just to see what's going on here. What's great about this is everything, TurboTax, all these, they tend to start with like a free tier. So you can at least get started for free. No harm. So if you're wondering, oh, maybe I can try to do my taxes. I did this last year. You can start and put in all the work and do this stuff all for free. And then they're not going to charge you until you file. So here they have options from 0 up to 70. Now, I will say the $70 tier is for the self-employed. So that would be pretty much any freelancer. So it looks like you'd be $70, but there you have it. Another one I wanted to point out here was Free Tax USA, because we did a tax episode with Michael Farmer and he files with Free Tax USA. And again, it's like they have a free tier that starts the federal return, they say is free, and then you pay for your state return, $15, it says. This, I believe, is similar to TurboTax, but it seems to be a little less expensive. But I haven't filed with them, so I can't actually prove that, but I'm just judging off of their website. And then also there's H&R Block and there's TurboTax. H&R Block, I've known people who go to the brick and mortar of that. So if that's a backup option, maybe that you want to actually talk to somebody, that might be a good way to start online with H&R Block and then actually take it in if you have questions or if you're worried about something. So now this is where I start separating out accountants into states. And we have California, we have Washington, D.C., Florida, Illinois/Chicago, New York, and Nevada. Other states, I'm sure, have accountants, but I just am not aware of ones that are focused on the arts. I would think Georgia would have some arts entertainment accountants. Maybe if anybody's listening from there, they can add them to this list. But anyway, again, I said it doesn't matter what the location is. Now, but in here, I do have 3 asterisks next to some of those, and I want to point those out. So one is Artist Tax Prep, and that is an accountant/company based in DC. And what I love about them is on their Instagram, they have links to a spreadsheet template, and I'm going to click into it here. It takes you to a Google Sheet, and it has tabs along the bottom. One is income, another's estimated taxes, expenses, car expenses, equipment, travel, home office, end of year organizer. Let me actually click into each of those so we can see them. But here, income, it's super simple. It's saying, when did you work? What did you get paid? Who paid you? You just keep a list of all your payments. All right, then estimated taxes. Oh, I learned something by looking at this sheet. And this says that you have to pay quarterly taxes if you have paid $1,000 to the IRS for 1 year. So if you had to pay over $1,000 in a year, then in theory, you should be paying quarterly taxes. So I didn't know that there was a number associated with it, because sometimes people pay quarterly, like freelancers on the show that I ask, we have a 50-50 success rate of whether they pay quarterly or not. So in theory, if you're not paying $1,000 in taxes, you don't actually have to pay quarterly. So that's just something to be aware of. Then there's an expenses tab. And what I like about it is it separates it out into different categories. And so there's like promotional events, swag, printed materials. There's just all these options of things that you can be like, oh, this is my expense for this, or this would go into this category. And something I like about it is, see if I can widen this column here. I cannot. But anyway, it says gas only if using a car that's not yours. So that clarifies that you can't just write off gas that you were putting in your own car. So there's little things like that. Then there's a tab for car expenses, and there's a little worksheet in here that sort of says what is deductible. So if you're going from your home to your regular job, that's not deductible. If you're going to a temporary workstation from your home, that's deductible with stipulations. So it's a really easy to read chart. I love that. I love it. Then there's a tab for equipment, which is fairly straightforward. There's a travel log. That's a thing. If you're going to deduct mileage, you have to keep a log of your mileage. There's home office expenses. And the final one is an end of year organizer. And the end of year organizer is what I would call like what the accountant wants to see. It's sort of like taking all these other numbers from the other tabs and plugging them in here. And then other things like how much did you contribute to an IRA? do you have health insurance? How much did you spend on that? Stuff like that, that don't really apply to any of those other categories because you don't need to be tracking them throughout the year. Okay, so thank you for letting me go through that. And why I wanted to is because I have a spreadsheet that we'll get into in a future episode of how I keep track of my deductions and itemizations. But that is a really comprehensive, like if you don't know what you're doing with taxes, go to Artist Tax Prep, download that sheet. And whether or not you use Artist Tax Prep, you at least have the structure, like that you can make it your own. So I really like that. The other asterisks I have are all New York City based accountants, and these are because I know people that use them. So Trudy Durant, the Associates, and Claris Group. And Claris Group was a recommendation. I don't actually know people that use them, but I visited their website and they're very artist. So anyway, so those are four choices you really have. The other accountants on this list, including my own, they are perfectly fine to do your taxes and they do have entertainment clients. However, they are not like focused on artists. So the accountant we have is actually, they seem to be like lawyers and doctors type of thing. We got referred to them through something. Anyway, long story short is anybody on this list can do your taxes. And I'll leave it at that. Let me end there. Okay, so now at the very bottom of the list, I have national, international, and no specific location accountants. These I think are mostly London based, but if you need tax help outside of the USA, you would find them at the bottom of this accountant list. All right, so this episode is off to an exciting start. We got lots of accounting help here. So let's X out of this. Now, that was a tangent from our resources. So now we're back at our first artistic finance resource list, and we're back to our top section, which is taxes. So the next link there is excel1040.com. And I learned about this from Travis McHale on his episode. I downloaded that spreadsheet. So that's a free, excel1040.com is a free spreadsheet from somebody who's been doing it for 20 years, 30 years. But they put this out and it's like a comprehensive tax filing system. All I'm going to say is it is overwhelming to me. It is like that artist tax prep sheet, only it is the amount of tabs. I don't know how you can tell how many tabs there are, but if you just arrow over, it's like every possible schedule or form that the IRS has of taxes is on here somewhere. So Travis is clearly on top of his taxes and he uses this. It is amazing. There's instructions and it's a lot. But if you have a pretty good grasp on taxes, this is definitely something you might want to check out. You will understand it. I think this is like if TurboTax were just in an Excel document, this is what it would look like. But instead, TurboTax makes it look really sexy and easier and basic. And this, you need to have a little bit of knowing how to navigate around. But what's beautiful about it is it's free. It's all encompassing of taxes. And yeah, that's that. The next thing under taxes is gsa.gov, and that is the per diem rates. So if you're working out of town and you're not getting per diem or you're not getting reimbursed for that, and you need to mark that on your taxes of, say, I was out of town for a week and my per diem deduction would be X amount, you know that X amount by going to gsa.gov and seeing what is the daily rate in that city or town or state that I was working in. I have irs.gov on here. Now that we learned from Christina Watanabe that you can go there and check your prior returns and you can see any missed 1099s. Just a warning. So I was fact checking this because I didn't know this was an option. So I logged in a couple weeks ago to see what Christina was talking about. And then a couple days ago, I got a letter from the IRS and I was very worried because I haven't filed my taxes yet. And I was like, what is going on? Anyway, the letter said, you logged into irs.gov. We just wanted you to know that. So if that was you, cool. And if it wasn't you, let us know. So that was all the letter was. So just know that if you go set up an account here, you might get a letter from the IRS, but don't freak out until you read it. Okay, and then one other thing is you can see missed 1099s. However, when I was on there, I could only see last year's. And so I think I would have to file an extension this year before I am able to see the 1099s that I might have missed. So I'm just saying that. Okay, and then the last link here is for SSA.gov, the Social Security Administration. And that really doesn't have to do with taxes, but it's just a nice link that if you're like, how much money am I going to make from Social Security when I retire? You can go there and see how much you've contributed they'll give you an estimate on what you're hopefully going to be seeing. Our next header here is financial planning resources. So it starts with a budget template. Now, this is just a generic Google monthly budget. It has it separated out really well into this beautiful look. And there's two tabs. One is the summary, and then there's the other one, which is the transactions. So you can go put in your monthly bills and your income and then see, are you spending too much, too little? So that's one that you can modify to become your own. And then I have a budget template that is printable, and that is underneath it. And that's just a Dropbox link to a file to a piece of paper that you could print out. And this is if you wanted to do it on paper or you just wanted to do it one time to sort of understand what your budget is, you could print this out very easily and write on it. The next thing is the Freelancer spreadsheet. Now, we already went through this because this is the one from Artist Tax Prep. I just love it so much. And so I put it here in the financial planning part. Another link is for You Need a Budget, which is an app that I don't use, and I don't think I know anybody that uses it. However, it's very much recommended online for freelancers. So if you're into budgeting and digital, that might be a way to go. I have a link to a high yield savings account. Now, this is Basque Bank, and that's only because when I searched for highest interest rate online banks, Basque Bank popped up. It's one that Nicole and I use or we have an account in. So I'm not affiliated to it at all, but it's an option. And then we have a link to the Entertainment Community Fund. Now, I've spoken about them on a lot of episodes. What is beautiful about them is everything on their website is free, and it's free to anybody who is an artist or just likes art, frankly, is all the requirement is. They have a whole financial wellness department or person. A lot of the financial resource links that I have, they have, but they organize classes. And so you can actually go take workshops of how to budget. So that's just a good organization that has a lot going on. All right, the next link is Elsa Hiltner's Theater Designer Pay Resource. Now, I'm going to click onto this. This is a living Google spreadsheet. It's incredible. So what it is it's a bunch of tabs for different states and areas. So I'm just going to click into, well, I'm in Missouri now. So let's go to Missouri. So I click on this Missouri tab. And what it is a list of schools and theaters that designers have worked at, and the designers anonymously come in here and they say, I worked for them in this year. I got paid this much money, and this was the resources that they allotted me. You know, like if you're a lighting designer, they had a production electrician, or if you're a costume designer, they had a shop. And so it's information like that. Here I'm seeing things in St. Louis at the rep from year 2023 to 2024. So if you take nothing else from this episode, know that if you're a designer, you can go look at pretty much any organization and maybe find somebody that's worked there before from this anonymous spreadsheet. You can see, is the offer in line with everything else? Or if you're going to ask for more, how much do you think you can get more than what they're regularly paying? Or you can see if they don't have any resources and it's a disaster, or if they're a very professional company. And so maybe the fee is not what you want, but you know that you're going to be fully supported in the design area. And if you're listening to this, you are obligated to go put in your fees into this document, which again, you can do anonymously. And I just got to say, Elsa Hiltner, for doing this, you are amazing. This is really an amazing thing. And actually, let me get a little more specific in here. Let me go to the Chicago area. I haven't worked in Chicago very much, but let's just go to this. So we go to Chicago. The first entry is the 16th Street Theater. And the year range that this person put in was 2019, 2020. They were a lighting designer and they got paid a $750 fee. There was no labor support. There was no mileage reimbursement. That's about all the information we have on this. But hey, that's pretty cool. Another little piece of information there is that the operating budget of the theater is $223,000. So that's not wildly big for a theater. And the top executive pay is $32,000. So right there, you can see it's a small theater. That pay is in line for a small theater. Then there's one called the Actors Gymnasium. There's a costumes designer that in 2018 got paid $500 for a fee, no labor support, and no mileage reimbursement. However, the operating budget for that theater is $1 million. Anyway, but you get the point. That is an awesome resource. So then back to the living document, and the next link is health insurance, which is healthcare.gov. Whereas right now, freelancers can go there for health insurance. And the final link I have there is the big three questions, which is a financial literacy test. And the reason I have this on there is there was a study that said that people who stay in the arts and work as a career for more than 10 years tend to be people with financial literacy. And so that's just important that if you're working in the arts and you intend to continue working in the arts, you need to have a grasp on financial literacy. And if you want to know whether you do or not, take this 3-question quiz and see if you indeed do know sort of something about financial literacy. Our next header is education. The first 2 links are slideshow presentations that I put together. The first was for a class of designers at NYU called Entering the Industry. And so if you're an educator and you want to just cover some of these financial topics, that basically it's these resources, a lot of that. If you want to cover this in class, you feel free to use this slideshow. The next link is the business of the business. And this was the same slideshow, but I added and modified and changed around some things for the class at Rockford University. But you can look through both of those slideshows, and if they're useful to you, you are more than welcome to download them and use them in class. All right, the next 3 links are worksheets that we've created from this show. So the first one is software costs for lighting designers. This was our LDI episode from 2023. What it is it's just a single one piece of paper. It's talking about all the software options we have and how much they cost. And this is a great thing to share with students so that they get an idea of what they're going to have to be paying for things annually. All right, the next 2 are about pay negotiations. So we did one episode with lighting designers and another with designers and their agents, and that was costume designers and hair designers and sound designers. It was a variety of designers and their agents. And these are just a couple sheets of tips that were said and advice that was given, just put into a concise worksheet. So this is the one for lighting designers. And then here's the agent and designer one. So this one with the agents talking about good techniques that they used and or misunderstandings about what agents do. All right. So once we're through education, we now have a header of job boards. You'll hear in theater that you get jobs from working and then you get jobs from people. And that is 100% true. However, job boards do exist. Yes, starting out, you can use them, but even later on in your career, you can also use them or at least check them out. So the first one we have up here is Mandy. Now, I've never used Mandy, but they have one for the UK, one for the USA, one for Canada, one for India, one for Australia, and then they have an international one. And they have categories from performers or to production and crew. We have Playbill. And now Playbill I used when I was in New York. I got some interviews from it. I never actually got a job from it. It's not just New York. Backstage, that's another one that I don't think I ever used Backstage. Let me see. Let me go to the website. I don't think I've ever. Yeah, Backstage seems to be more for, well, no, they have acting, voiceover crew. Yeah, it seems more performer based. I'll say that. So I don't know if anybody's ever used Backstage, let me know. And then there's Stage Link, and that is more circus based and seems to be more Europe based. But again, all these places, they do have jobs all over the place. Offstage Jobs, that's one that I've used and actually gotten work from. Multiple gigs from this. And this you can separate by region, by like lighting department or costume department, etc. And then there's a link to Production Hub, which is more of film and TV. There's Broadway World, Art Search, which is owned by Theater Communications Group. And then the last link is Entertainment Careers, which is a website that's also mostly film and TV. So if you're just starting out, you can look for jobs there and you can find jobs there. Even though, yes, you'll get work from working, you'll work more. And also people you know, your network, they're going to get you the jobs. But you can look here and you can get work this way. All right, the next header we have is unions. And so I have USA 829 first because that's my union. Then I have IATSE. I always call IATSE the stagehands union, but it's the theatrical stage employees union. And this is important because there are so many locals, including USA 829, that are a part of IATSE. And so the next link I have is for 798, which is the hair and makeup union. However, there are probably hundreds. Yeah, there's got to be hundreds of locals that are under the IATSE. Chances are, if you're a theatrical stage employee or you're working with some sort of union, it's going to be connected to IATSE. And then underneath this, I have links to SDC, which is stage directors and choreographers. I have the Opera and Ballet Union, the Musicians Union, Actors and Stage Managers, AEA, SAG-AFTRA, APPAM. I think I have all the live events unions here listed. And then at the bottom, I have something called the Freelancers Union. So this is not specific to theater entertainment at all. But here it says it's the official home of the self-employed. And what is good about this is we mentioned the Entertainment Community Fund as being a free resource for artists and live event artists of any kind. Freelancersunion.org is if you are having trouble with healthcare or just anything, you can go here and there's other self-employed people that might be able to help you. Now, I'm just saying it's not artist-based because there's a lot of different kinds of self-employed people in the world. But if we just scroll through their website, find insurance to help you plan for the future, or make a plan for your financial future, or how-to guide for freelancers. These are resources that this will work because we're all businesses, we're all self-employed. And so this information can be helpful, can be useful. And another thing about it is there might be group discounts or things on their website that you'll have access to maybe before you're in IATSE or before you're in USA 29. So back to our living document, and our next header is community building. So the first one up, I have asterisk because I think it's so wonderful, and it is called Design Action. And this is a Chicago-based group. This link is to their Linktree links. I'm just going to read off some of their headers so you sort of get the information they're trying to convey. So Springboard to Design, Rising BIPOC interested or available to assist, Rise Theater Directory, Design Action's minimum rate benchmark calculator. I want to look at that in a second. Their public ledger, they're very upfront about their donations. Design Action website, designer gallery, the 5 principles. But I'm getting to the bottom of their list, which I find is the super cool stuff. One, they have a link to Elsa Hiltner's theatrical designer pay resource. Again, that I love that document. I wish everyone knew about that. Then you have Megan Sandberg Zakin's BIPOC Theater Designers and Technicians, which is just another amazing resource. Now, one thing about this is I don't know if I should be publicizing this because people have their contact information on there. But if you're trying to get a hold of a BIPOC designer or a technician, go to this resource. There's also the BIPOC Arts Database. Okay, so I want to go to this Design Actions Minimum Rate Benchmark Calculator. What is this? This is cool. So step 1, enter the zip code. Step 2, calculate using estimated total hours. You put in your hours that you're going to be working, and then there's the total hours. Then there's a multiplication factor. And then step 4 is your livable wage, your minimum hourly rate, and your target hourly rate. This is amazing. I don't quite understand how to put this information in here, but I'm going to look at this because this is really amazing, trying to find the livable wage. Oh, I love this. Cool. Okay, so anyway, this is why I love Design Action, because they certainly, if you're a designer, there are really good resources here. Okay, so back to our living document. The next links we have are We See You White, We See You White American Theater, No More 10 out of 12s, Broadway Advocacy Coalition, and Broadway Stage Management Symposium. So these are all groups of multiple people doing lots of things, getting lots of involvement all over the place. Our next header is scholarships. I only have 2 on here currently. They're both for historically underrepresented theater workers. The 1/52 project, that's for theater designers. Then there's the Cody Renard Richards Scholarship, which is for stage managers. All right, the next header is financial communities. And what I mean by this is artistic finance. I'm here. We have resources, and you can join our Patreon, and we have a sense of community, as in you have questions, we'll get them answered. However, it's a little bit more piecemeal. Everyone's doing their own thing. If you have a specific question, I'll try to answer it, etc. But these communities are more groups of people coming together. So maybe you need people to bounce ideas off of, or you need to work together with people. This is maybe where I would look into something like this. Or maybe you just this is all too overwhelming for you and you just want a single place to sort of get all your business and finance and career stuff together, that's what these groups are good for. So the first one is Financial Grove, and this is actually created by a patron of ours, Sylvie Scowcroft. Now, Sylvie doesn't know I'm saying this, but she has a really good website and has financial help of all sorts. A super wicked smart person. So the Financial Grove, that's a place, and it's centered around artists. Abundance Bound, that is by Miata Adoga. Now, it's performer based. However, it's for everybody in the arts. That's like a monthly subscription type thing, but they do workshops that people do together on Zoom or scheduling budgeting time together, stuff like that. And then this one I just found out about from Instagram because I'm working on an upcoming episode about taxes. And this one was pointed out, and this is Minerva Financial Arts, and that is by Elaine Grogan Latroll. And it's another one where they're doing workshops. If you're at an organization, maybe you could and work with them to sort of do a whole class or something like this. So that's if you just want more of a financial community. All right. And then the final header that we have is just called episodes. And what I did here was I have subheadings. And so that's like costume designers, set designers, sound designers, projection designers, lighting designers. We have a lot of. I have one for film and television, producers, negotiations, taxes, home buying, and then hair, wigs, and makeup. So those are the subheaders. And under those, I have links to all the episodes we've done with people like that. And actually looking at this, I realized I need to have more sound designers and projection designers because we have not had that many, and set designers. But for instance, under costume designers, we have Paul Taswell, Greg Barnes, Cynthia Winstead, and then Christina Pasquale and Elizabeth Weisler. All right, so that is the end of the document. All right, that's it for this week's episode. I hope that you found it useful. I want to say that I'm in talks with Asia Jackson to cover filing taxes using TurboTax. Now, that episode is scheduled to be recorded on February 25th and then published on March 3rd. But I'm letting you know because there are a lot of freelancers that file their own taxes, and I want to learn how. And if you're listening and you want to know how, I want you to know that too. Now, if you are in need of filing your taxes and you're planning to use someone to help you, I would say definitely mark April 1st as your deadline because whoever you use is going to need time to turn them around. The official tax due date is April 15th, but just make your unofficial deadline April 1st. Even if you file an extension that lets you go past the 15th, you still have to pay your estimated taxes. So that means that you have to get your 1099s and your W-2s somewhat organized by that point because you're going to have to pay the taxes that you, in theory, are going to owe. All right, so that's it for resources. I do want to talk to the patrons now. So if you are a patron, thank you very much. The support is really appreciated. And if you're now wondering, well, why do we even have the Patreon if, Ethan, you're going to post everything on the website? Let me just explain. All right, so there are still reasons for the Patreon. And the first is that it's the only way I've been able to generate income for the show. And then the other is that it provides a really good interface. So, and part of that interface is that it lets everybody get a custom Patreon podcast feed. And also a big thing that the Patreon paywall provides is a bit of protection from search engines and AI. For example, we had investor Ira Gilbert on the show, and he told this story about an interaction he had with Trump, and he didn't want that going out into the public, but he was okay with us putting it onto the Patreon feed. Also, the class that I talked with at NYU, they provided us the video of that class. And they were happy for me to share it, but they just didn't want it out in the public for everybody and the search engines and all that. And likewise for that class at Rockford University, they said, yes, cool to have that video and share it with people, but again, didn't want it public. So then the other thing is there still are bonus episodes and extended episodes that go onto Patreon. Some of the interviews, as you may know, go long, and most people don't necessarily want to listen to that entire long episode. But you know me, I sometimes go off on tangents that are unrelated to anything, and it doesn't really apply to sort of the main focus of the show. And so that goes on Patreon as a bonus. Though I will also say that I now tend to put bonus material onto Patreon, but it's also available to free Patreon members. That being said, not everything goes there. And so you still have to be a paid Patreon member to get everything on that feed. But moral of the story, the Patreon has morphed into the way to support me in the show if you want. And so it's there if you're a longtime listener and you want to be involved and included. And for everybody that does that, thank you so much. And just a quick sort of back of the napkin math here about our budget. So the monthly software cost we have for the podcast is roughly $70. My trip to LDI each year is roughly $3,000. And then I've spent $6,000 on podcasting gear over the past 5 years, including the step and repeat, which you may have heard about in previous episodes, and I'm very proud of it. And then we've spent about 2,200 on editing. And that's virtually nothing because I've done 99% of all the editing. So if you add that all up, those expenses average to $460 a month. Now, that doesn't factor in my commitment to donate 25% of income from the podcast. And so that comes off the top. Now, we've actually given more than $10,000 to various theater companies, charities, or freelancers in the 5 years that I've been hosting the show. So if you factor some of that stuff in, then the monthly artistic finance expenses are actually about $643 a month. So that is where your Patreon support is going. Now, I obviously have hopes and dreams of getting into the black sometime, but from the beginning, it's just been a deficit, and that's okay because it's something I'm passionate about and it's something that I'm choosing to do. I've actually never taken a Patreon payout. I've just reinvested it or I've passed it along to something. But even though I haven't actually seen it, it has really made a positive impact. And I'm really thankful for you, the patrons, for making that happen. So thank you. And if you're now listening and you've heard all that and you want to help me out with the show and this website and all this, please do consider joining up as a patron. And you can do that at patreon.com/artisticfinance. One more time, that is patreon.com/artisticfinance. All right, the dad joke to end the episode. Actually, here, a side note here. Nicole had me watch a documentary called Dads, directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. And of course, it was very warm and fuzzy and nice. But it did make me think that I know that I would probably say a majority of listeners to this show have no intentions of ever being a parent. But it's just something that I am a parent. Theo is almost 2 years old. I'm obviously in love with him. He's like the greatest. And I communicate that sometimes on this show. And I love sharing it. And I'm the dad that like I want to show photos of him and I want to talk about him all the time because he's such a part of my life, right? So I'm not ashamed of sharing about him or anything like that. But watching this documentary did make me reflect and think most of the people that listen to this show, for whatever reason, have no intention of being parents. And yet, none of you care that I share or talk about him. And I just want to say thank you. If you're one of those people that you have no intention of having a kid, but you let me talk about them and you're happy for me when, he has his second birthday coming up, that's really exciting. So I guess I want to say I'm sorry that I do that to you, even though I love it. So thank you. So anyway, it was just a reflecting, but I thought of this because I'm doing a dad joke at all the end of the episodes. But anyway, the dad joke to end this week's episode has to do with our news today that the current president has repealed the USA's plastic straw ban. Now, the arguments against the ban say that straws are really insignificant and that they only make up 0.025% of ocean waste, which equates to across the globe only 50,000 pounds annually. Now, that is a fair point, but also if we kept the ban, we could keep 50,000 pounds a year of plastic waste out of the ocean. And isn't that what we're concerned about here, keeping the ocean clean? Rather than letting our straws go down the Mississippi and straight into the Gulf of America? Ugh, that's another thing that I hope listeners in the future, I hope it has returned to being called the Gulf of Mexico. Ridiculous. But anyway, I thought maybe there's something about this sort of plastic straw debate that I don't understand. So I went to my friendly neighborhood sea turtle to get his opinion, and it turns out that he wants nothing to do with it, and he doesn't want to get sucked into the debate. That's it for today. Until next time, break a leg.
Thank you for listening to Artistic Finance, where we interview successful artists, leaders, and investors to help educate and inspire the creative community. To access our show notes and resources, go to artisticfinance.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any decision, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Artistic Finance. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.